Hi everyone, and welcome back. In my last video you would have seen me making this, my sign. The problem I have with making them in the classic method is that you end up with holes in your tabletop for alignment purposes. And after a bit of thinking, I've come to the conclusion that it should be possible to make a double-sided project without the need to drill holes in the tabletop. Here's how I'm going to do it. Viewers of my YouTube channel will remember this. It's a parallel rule. I've set it on my table and we are going to butt my stock up against the rule. I clamp the stock down at one end and then remove the rule. I can now clamp it at the other end to the table. I have zeroed my cutter to the table in the normal way and picked an arbitrary point on my stock, calling it X and Y0. Well, that was a bit of an unexpected result. I'll have to give it another try. I've now repositioned my cutter to a new spot on the board and we'll cut this piece again. Now this time it's a vast improvement over my previous attempt. All I changed was the way I cut it. On this one, I cut around the pieces, slowly progressing inward or outward, depending on where the cutter started. On this one, I did it as a raster, so I just simply started here and cut left to right. And as you can see, it didn't lift the pieces off. Now you'll also notice I drilled a single hole in this piece. This hole does not go into the table, it just simply goes through to the other side of the stock. Also previously I would have cut around the outside here, but this time I'm going to do the final profile cut when I turn it over. Alright, so the first thing we need to look at is this hole. The whole position of this hole needs to be known, and it is at position X10, Y100. And I got that off my CAD software. So now I can turn my board over and I need to reattach my parallel ruler jig. I can now bring my router in, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cutter down into this hole here. Okay, now it's just in the hole there, and now I'm just going to drag the whole thing forward like so and butt it nicely up against the parallel rule. I can now bring my clamp in and clamp my stock back down to the table. Now at this stage I only have the back clamp on the stock, but before I move the router head and the parallel rule, I need to change my X and Y0. Because I drilled that hole through from the other side, it's at a known location. In this particular instance, X is 100 and Y is 10. We don't change Z at all. We can now safely lift the cutter out of the hole and move it away from the stock. You can also remove the parallel rule and reclamp the stock to the table. Now this time my project is in a regular shape, so when I created the new file I mirrored it when I flipped it over. So to cut the second side of this particular project I've had to load a completely new file which was a mirror of the first. This time it will cut the design in the back on this side here, and then we'll profile my finished project. I'll just push the origin button, and using the settings we set here before, the cutter knows where to go back to 0, 0. Right, well it's finished cutting now. It's come up a little bit furry, so I'm just going to give it a quick light sand with a bit of sandpaper, like so, and that's just knock off the bits here that have been pulled up by the cutter. A small vacuum. And then we'll remove the piece, like so. So here's the finished result. As you can see, there's a nice even border all the way around. Likewise, when we turned around, we have exactly the same thing on the other side. So now let's have a quick look at the parallel ruler and see how that helps us reset the jig. Those of you who watched my jig resetting video will have seen this parallel rule before. It's just made from a piece of 12mm MDF, and there's nothing really that special about it. It has a small piece screwed here which allows me to set it parallel or reset it in the same place every time. It has a couple of bolts here that lock into my T-slots, and usually just a quick jiggle like that gets them into position. I can then clamp it into place, and that is the parallel rule in place. The rest of the rule consists of a couple of pieces of aluminium and another piece of MDF. When this piece moves, this surface here always remains parallel to the x-axis. So when initially I put my piece of MDF on the table, I simply used the parallel rule to set this piece of the board here parallel with the x-axis. I then clamp this in position. When I'd finished cutting the first side and flipped my board over, I used the cutter on the router and just located it in the hole there. I was then able to use this here to pull the piece close to my parallel rule, and when it was in range I was then able to bring the ruler up to it and let the board swing around until this piece was parallel to the x-axis again. At that point I clamped it down. This was a known point, Y10 X100. So we knew what this point was, and so long as this piece remains parallel to the table, that it remains parallel to the x-axis, that will be our second point of reference. So by using this parallel rule, resetting this becomes very easy. Now of course you could do this by eye if you wanted. You could actually just have a line drawn on the table and then you could just move it around like that until it was parallel and away you go. But the parallel rule is just so simple to use, and it's just no hassle. You can just bring it anywhere you liked on the table, it didn't matter where, parallel it up there, call this the known X and Y coordinates, and away you go. It will cut the thing out correctly every time. So the beauty of this method is it's pretty easy to use, and it doesn't require you to drill holes in your tabletop. Well, I hope you found that useful, and you'll give double-sided machining a go, using whichever method suits you best. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I'll catch up with you again next time. Cheers!